Clown gets it. Clown always gets it. Wow, I can't wait for my favorite nano e-celeb to argue against a micro e-celeb. I mean, is he a micro e-celeb? So I got into a tiff on Twitter, as I do, and all the Sitch stands came out, and it's annoying. It really is, because Adam Friended is supposed to be one of the good guys, and I used to enjoy his. I mean, it's long format. Adam seems a nice guy. Sitch seems like a nice guy. It's just really is well. I know Adam Friended is ethnically Jewish. I don't think he's religiously Jewish. Sitch, I don't know if Sitch is Jewish. Frankly, I can't listen to Sitch long enough. So here, you guys can't say this. So I tweeted this out. Hey, Friended Forever, that's Adam Friended's thing. Really? I'm following PSA Sitch? I didn't realize I was following PSA Sitch. Why am I following PSA Sitch? So unfollow that. Okay. Could you come get your boy? He's drunk again. Honestly, this is why I can't listen. Sitch politics and absolutely refuses to be educated. And so this is the original thing. So, okay, Glenn Greenwald. The U.S. began openly touting NATO's expansion into Ukraine in 2008 under Bush. That was when now CIA Director Bill Burns wrote his memo, was a not just Putin, and would trigger war in Crimea and Donbass. Guess who was U.S. ambassador to NATO then? Newland. It was also Newland who got caught picking Ukraine's next president after she helped remove its democratically elected one in. If you want to pick this apart with micro precision, trying not to understand what Glenn Greenwald was saying, then you could, just like debate bros on the internet do, and guess what? We have our own little debate bro on the internet, not understanding deliberately. Well, not deliberately. That's the problem. It's not deliberate. He knows nothing about the Ukraine situation, right? Sitch is precisely one of these gamer guys who upside down world out, just like Greg Horowitz, just like everybody else who drives me insane, sticks his head out, sees the craziness. He can get involved. And honestly, to some degree, I mean, this is what Jimmy Dore did as well, but kind of, but not really, but kind of. And it's this level of hot take punditry that really makes me dislike everything about our cognitive environment. Glenn Greenwald is no expert on the Ukraine, although he's certainly far, far, far better educated than PSA Sitch. Remember, Glenn Greenwald looked through the trove of revelations from Snowden and picked which things could be used for public consumption. Glenn Greenwald has been intimately involved in and aware of what is going on in Brazil personally, and both living there and being involved in the politics there, and as a journalist, he's somebody who understands international relations at a level which is probably better than mine, I would say. Even though, I mean, he went to law school. I went to law school, been studying government. I got a degree in political science. He certainly knows the politics of, I would say, Europe, Russia, South America, probably Africa, probably East Asia much better than I do. There are things in the Middle East that I think I probably understand better than Glenn Greenwald does, but he's not a subject matter expert. And this is my problem, the death of expertise. And PSA Sitch is arguing with him based on some Googling he did. And the conversation goes completely off the rails. Glenn says she's from one of those, the most deranged neocon families. She was Cheney's top advisor for the Iraq War, then ran Ukraine for Obama and Biden. And Glenn Greenwald is basically right. Ukraine is kind of sort of a third world nation, not really, could actually be called a fourth world nation, but was really a second world nation. That's when you're actually using those technical terms, right? So after World War II, there was the Cold War, which had fight east and west between the Soviet Union and its allies, including the Warsaw Pact states and its satellite states in Eastern Europe, and the United States and Great Britain and the NATO alliance. And there was international jockeying, which PSA Sitch, I'm sure, knows nothing about, the past 70 years. Okay? This was United States relations and world international politics for decades. And trillions of dollars were spent while it was a Cold War, certainly tens of thousands of people, if not much larger. I mean, if you include the Vietnam War and Korea, what were the death tolls there? So incredibly, incredibly complex situation in which Ukraine, as a former Soviet republic, meaning it was part of the USSR, And if somebody wants to jump on and just so like I'm not is okay, Andrew, you got me. Man thought PSA stood for penal substitutionary atonement and got completely blindsided by Jacob's. Apparently, I cut out. Sorry about that. Hopefully, it's better now. There's no more dinner table convos anymore, Jacob. We only talk politics when it gets bad and heated. Absolutely love Snowden. So Sitch responds, that didn't happen, and was not what the phone call was about, but the truth about the call will not be accepted because it's the linchpin of the American cooed Ukraine fantasy. Glenn Greenwald, you can listen to the call yourself. Newland openly supported the protesters demanding removal of the democratically elected government. Newland and Pratt picked the next leader. Even corporate media is willing to admit this but not criticize it. And this is the thing. Obviously, like, this is not a point of debate. And Sitch, knowing nothing, literally nothing, has picked up on a tiny detail which he thinks is relevant, and like this has become his little thing, and I don't know what to tell you. So I never made the claim you think I did in your first sentence. I agree you cannot understand the call by just reading it. You have to actually go and find out what the context of the call is, which I did. No, you didn't. That context supports what I said. No, it doesn't. Other journalists, especially ones at the time the call was leaked, came to the exact same conclusion. That's why no one really talks about the story except in specific heterodox circles where the call has ironically years later been removed from its context and misunderstood. You simply saying it's complicated is a weak punt. You don't actually know or have any facts or claims to back up your position. Your position is simply, I trust experts that I like. When was that my position? Why don't you blindly trust them as well? That wasn't my position. Well, just as I don't trust the MSM blindly, I don't trust independent journalists or experts blindly either. It's interesting that you think I should. I asked Glenn to come on the show, so we'll see if we can talk to an expert of your liking. Glenn Greenwald is not an expert on Ukraine. I'm not asking for an expert of my liking. I'm asking for expertise and intellectual humility in long form podcasting and YouTube streaming, which is what this corner is supposed to be about, not idiotic individuals thinking that they can Google what goes on and understand them well. And that's my entire point about the idiotic debate bro way of like, think for yourself. Like, he's trying to think by himself. And that's the most idiotic thing anyone can ever do. Like, please stop thinking for yourself. And yes, now that I wasn't going to mention that I was messaging at Adam Friended, but I was, and that's obvious from the whatchamacallit, from the screen. So, okay, back to me. Okay. I don't know. Is anybody going to jump on? Or am I just going to sit here ranting? The reason why I streamed is because I'm trying to make a meta point. It's not about Ukraine, although Ukraine is obviously important, right? Ukraine is obviously important. There's a war going on there, right? And U.S. policy in Ukraine is, what about the rise of the autodidacts? And that is the issue. It really is. So autodidacts is, okay, let's talk about our favorite autodidact, Sam. Now that everybody knows his name, Sam Tiedemann, right, from Transfigured. So Sam Tiedemann is a expert on several things. First and foremost, he's an expert on the COVID vaccine. Bet you didn't know that, unless you watched one stream I did with him about COVID. You can look his name up, and he is second author on 2 peer-reviewed journals articles in one in the Lancet, and the other one I believe is either the New England Journal of Medicine or the Journal of the American Medical Association. Either one. The fact is, being second author on 2 articles published in those journals, peer-reviewed journals, like that's the equivalent of a PhD. Yeah. Sam's pretty smart, right? And so when he talks about the COVID vaccines, he talks with a level of expertise few people on the face of the earth have. But people don't really listen to him. Kirk, you're the last guy I expected.
Shalom.
Shalom. How are you doing, Kirk?
Are we? I saw the stream title. Are we tearing into PSA Sitch and Adam?
Not Adam, although kind of Adam, but yes, PSA Sitch.
I saw Adam is actually a pretty big fan of what's his face, Jonathan Pajot. I don't think he's that bad.
Oh, Adam's like a friend of PDK's. Paul
What's
Vanderclay.
wait? A friend of what?
Paul Vanderclay.
Who's that again?
Paul Vanderclay's the big guy around here. Yeah. Kirk, Elijah kind of called it. I can't wait for Kirk to have no idea, not have any idea what we're talking about. Kirk, I hate to say this, but you're being an example of the type of lack of intellectual humility that I am ranting about. Like, part of the importance of being an autodidact or any sort of intellectual, which, yes, I actually hope I am some sort of an intellectual, is not only being able to talk about something intelligently, but recognizing when you have nothing to say and being quiet. And that is bothers me about what the exchange with PSA Sitch.
Did I say Did I say I had something to add?
No, but like, yeah, most people wouldn't. No, like,
I was
but
just
most.
asking what you were talking about. I didn't say I had anything to add to it.
I understand, Kirk. I am hopefully not attacking you, even though Garth thinks that was savage. Um, Adam Friended is definitely associates with PBK and JP, but I don't think Adam really gets what they're about. I also don't think Adam really cares that much. Adam has his life and the things that he's involved with, and frankly, I just don't think he cares that much. And like, listening to their show is it's just fine. It's like a show until Sitch starts pontificating about politics, which he knows nothing about. Like, here, we can actually listen to where's that video?
Yeah.
So this is their video. Okay, let me. Where's that? Okay. So here, this is their video, and frankly, like, that's Max Blumenthal said. People didn't know, and a lot of people unfortunately don't know because it's ad hominem. It's not ad hominem. There's a reason why Max Blumenthal is where he is.
One real quick thing. They're not going to copyright strike you?
No, they're not going to copyright strike me. And frankly, I'm not going to just play it straight through. So that
yeah, because I know YouTube,
it would be
YouTube, they try to steal basically everyone's ad revenue.
I have zero ad revenue, so this is not something I have to worry
okay, so you just did a stream for fun?
Yeah, mostly. Okay, so yeah, so Max Blumenthal like has the worst international relations takes ever, but they're educated.
Well, Max Blumenthal, isn't he in sort of the Oliver Stone, Noam Chomsky sort of anti-American left sphere?
Yes, and honestly, it's because he has daddy issues. Like, his father, Sid Blumenthal, who is a close associate of Hillary Clinton, and he recognized that everything he was taught was a lie, and instead of being reasonable about it, he became a bitter anti neoliberal far leftist, because he had to criticize his father from the left. And
Well,
yes,
there's
I realize this sounds ad hominem, but that's the only way you can understand the insane takes that Max Blumenthal has, is that his passionate hatred for his father and Hillary Clinton and his personal identity as a person on the left. Like, he could have become a Republican, kind of like some of the sons of, I think, like Valerie Jarrett's son or something. I forget who exactly has become somebody. Even Sean Lennon, to some extent, has become somebody of the right because of recognizing that they're do I think RFK Jr. will really debate Max? I think RFK Jr. is willing to talk to Max. I think a public debate would be a disaster, partially because Max knows enough about Israel to be very dangerous. That is the problem. Max Blumenthal knows just enough about Israel to be dangerous. And like, I wish I didn't have people like him on my side, because I do consider myself a non-Zionist, and he definitely panders to the anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist crowd, in not deliberately panders, but he plays into their hands in ways he doesn't seem to realize. And the fact that Jimmy thinks of him as an expert on Middle East policy and what's going on in the Middle East is a huge problem. The fact that the left has completely lost its mind about the Middle East, like it's lost its mind about everything else, continues to be the problem of everything.
Well, I don't see why Max would debate RFK Jr. since he's in the same sphere with Jimmy Dore and stuff. I don't think. I mean, they disagree on Israel, but I think that a public debate.
That there's been a pretty active back and forth between Max Blumenthal on Jimmy Dore's channel about RFK Jr. and because RFK Jr. went on Jimmy Dore, and then Max Blumenthal went on Jimmy Dore, and Jimmy Dore is trying to mediate between the two of them. But part of the problem is that Jimmy Dore outsources his cognition about the Middle East to people at the gray zone. And Aaron Mate is a very smart guy who seems like a really nice guy, but he has his entire framing of the Middle East comes from his time working with Amy Goodman.
Yeah, Democracy Now! I don't like Democracy Now!
Amy Goodman is a nasty piece of work. And it's just because the people you are arguing against are wrong doesn't mean you're right. And in a lot of places, I have very similar values with Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, and Max Blumenthal, and frankly, Adam Friended, and I'm guessing probably PSA Sitch as well. But decontextualized knowledge, knowing a few facts and not having a broad context, well, clown, if the Republicans don't like Democracy Now!, how come they're funding it? You do know that Democracy Now!'s funding comes from Republicans, right?
I didn't know that.
Where does Democracy Now! Get get broadcast?
I thought they got broadcast on mostly radio.
Yeah, which radio?
I don't know what specific stations.
KPFK, Pacifica Radio. Do you know what Pacifica Radio is?
No.
It's public radio.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. And this Amy Goodman's grift is pretending to be the left, like the reasonable intellectual left. That woman. And I mean, this is the problem with our distributed cognition. It really is. And we need to actually have responsible cognition. And we don't. Okay, so back to this video. Yeah.
Well, I thought Amy Goodman she's not exactly like Jimmy Dore, but because she's a lot more mainstream, but again, more like Oliver Stone or Noam Chomsky, in that they take those left-wing ideals in much more popularized audience as opposed to sort of niche internet spheres.
Okay, Kirk, you're not adding to this conversation, so I'm going to put you in the backstage. You can join the comments like everybody else. So it's not like I certainly don't agree with Max Blumenthal. I have my disagreements with Jimmy Dore. But in response to them, PSA Sitch gives this idiotic, absolutely idiotic explanation, which makes the people who listen to him dumber than they were before they listened to him. And like, this is the problem with having supposed allies, people who agree on your side, who he just Googled some stuff and he thinks he understands what was going on in U.S.-Russia relations regarding the Ukraine. And how many, let me see how many. 5,000 views, 200 likes, and this is not actually from, I think this is just a clip from their show. And so I'm guessing lots more people saw this, right? And it's like, oh God, and all of his stands. Okay.
I'm getting confused already.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see when the chart comes up, because I don't think it's time for the chart.
Sitch
He made a chart. He made a chart explaining what was going on in the Ukraine, because Sitch is now an expert on Ukraine relations. It's like, this reminds me of people who give medical advice after Googling things. I've been using this analogy on Twitter. Like, it's just, prove me wrong, bro. Prove me wrong. And autodidacts are worthwhile, and listening to people is worthwhile. But this presentation is something that even the people who agree with Sitch can't agree with. He says things which the people who agree with him can't agree, because it's a hot take. And it's just like the Young Turks all over again. Um, where was? Let me see if I can find what I wrote. I'll just play it again.
An excellent chart for us.
I made an MS Paint chart.
Right.
Right. So you're saying, okay, Sitch, how is this information warped into a conspiracy theory somehow
Mhm.
that the U.S. was behind the 2014 coup? Well, I'll tell you how.
Mhm. So we're talking about 2014 here, right? This is when they annexed Crimea and put a Russian puppet involved.
It's well, no, he's saying U.S. put a U.S. puppet in the Ukraine in 2014.
In 2014?
Yeah.
Then why did he run away to Moscow?
Okay. So let's try to understand this. There are human beings who live in a geographical area called Ukraine. The borders of this geographical area called Ukraine have included some of the worst misery in human history for centuries. These people are Slavs. The word Slav is where we get the word slave from. The history of the Slavs in Ukraine, and by the way, large percentages of them were Jewish, is incredible amounts of misery where a resource-rich land that is incredibly fertile, that is often referred to as the breadbasket of Europe, which is very flat, gets repeatedly raided by empire after empire. And its inhabitants are enslaved and dominated and murdered and genocided. Holodomor, anyone? For generation after generation after generation, right? The Ukrainians were treated horribly under the Soviets. The ethnic Ukrainians, there was attempts at ethnocide. Millions of ethnic Ukrainians were murdered through the worst forms of starvation and at best, I mean, some people will argue that a lot of the deaths was caused by negligence. Yay, when you're actually cooking and eating your own children, not sure you really care whether it was by negligence or not. Anyway, under the Soviet Union, Ukraine, while it was actually still a member nation of the United Nations, I'm pretty sure that's right, but fact check me on that. It was dominated by the Russians and colonized, and there were population transfers. After the disintegration of the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, many of the satellite states of Russia rebelled and formed their own countries. And the West was very supportive of this, and there was conflict within these countries to some degree, especially with those people who considered themselves ethnic Russians and those people who considered themselves ethnic Ukrainians. I mean, if you want actual opinions about what really happened, how to understand Ukraine, I highly recommend the interviews that Jordan Peterson did with Ukraine experts were actually pretty good. But people to actually listen to include Lex Friedman and Konstantin Kisin, who both know Russian, have family in the Ukraine, and have been following the situation closely. But Ukraine is a battleground for proxy wars between the West and Russia. That's what it has been for decades. And the actual people there have been suffering for this for decades and are dying in a war, in a proxy war. To some extent, it's not a proxy war anymore because Russia is weak enough that they don't have proxies, whereas Ukraine used to be their proxy. They do have proxies in the Ukraine. There are actual populations in Russia which are pro-Putin and pro-Russia, and there are certainly people in the Ukraine, quite likely a majority, at least in once you remove those areas that Putin has annexed already, who are for Ukrainian nationalism. Okay? To say that the United States is there to defend democracy is ridiculous. Unless you mean defend the democracy in a neocon, fight them over there instead of fighting us here, like we need to have an empire in order to, like, if you mean that type of democracy, like we need to have the people in the Ukraine die in our war against Russia so that we don't have to fight our war against Russia ourselves. Okay. But honestly, this is the same type of thing that's going on with Israel and the Jews and our military support of the state of Israel. It's a foothold. It's part of our empire. And I'll be honest with you, I see the point. I like living in the United States as much as anybody else. I like the fact that I live in a country where we have other people fight our battles for us, as opposed to Americans fighting our battles for us. there are definitely positives to that stance. Is it moral for us to give billions of dollars to people who are serious Ukrainian nationalists who are willing to fight for their independence against Russia in order to weaken Russia while people die in the Ukraine? Like, do you think the person, all of the refugees, all of the people who, like, they just want to live their lives, who are now living in a war zone, are happier because of it? Now, I have to say, I personally think that we do have an obligation here, and I'll tell you why. Because when the Soviet Union fell apart, Ukraine had a bunch of nuclear weapons. Not nuclear weapons that they actually had the technology to use, but they had a bunch of nuclear weapons. And the United States and Russia both brokered an agreement with the Ukrainian government where Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in return for assurances from the United States that we would protect their borders. Guess what? We haven't been protecting their borders. And if they had kept their nuclear weapons and tried to make sure that their army knew how to use them, they would not have had the... Now, this is Obama's fault. Like, this goes all the way back to Obama not defending Crimea. Like, our presidents should have said, oh, we made an agreement in exchange for giving up your nuclear weapons that we would protect your borders so that you didn't have to worry about using nuclear weapons for self-defense. That's never going to happen again. India and Pakistan are not going to give up their nuclear weapons. Not just because of what happened in Ukraine, but also because of what happened with Gaddafi, and Gaddafi giving up his weapons program in return for assurances. And then I'm sure the people around here have seen the Clinton video of we came, we saw, he died, or we conquered, he died, or whatever. So this is incredibly complex. And I am not either on the we have zero interest in Ukraine camp, and I am not in the we should be funding Ukraine for billions of dollars camp. I think it's an incredibly difficult, complex situation where people need to have intelligent discussions about the actual issues. Bretton Woods and the Peace of Westphalia matter. After World War II, there was an international decision made by the Europeans, mostly Western Europe, but generally Europeans, that the United States would say no more wars of military conquest. So before 1945, like basically, if you could take over a country militarily, you did, and nobody claimed that there was any sort of illegal conquest in because you did not have a just cause of a war, right? After World War II, we started talking about, nobody, you can't just invade other countries and take their territory. Which, I mean, generally I like, but that requires an enforcer, right? And the United States became the world's enforcer. That was Pax Americana. This is just a fact. Like, if you don't, like, this is not something that anybody should need to, like, get explained to them. Why am I going into the details? Because this is really complex stuff. And here, watch the video and see what they start saying.
No. They're saying Zelensky is the U.S. puppet that U.S. is installed.
I'm just gonna skip towards the end where they start saying the really stupid stuff.
And they've obviously stripped the context out of the phone call to make
Well,
this
there's
conspiracy
no
work.
context.
Okay, let me explain this phone call to you. When there was the protests, the negotiations about how to deal with the protests were carried on with the United States. Why? Because the United States was the well, actually, Aidan Paladin here says, and she's incredibly smart, it is a bit naive to believe the U.S. doesn't try to involve itself in international politics to try and influence them. Thank you. The United States obviously was the negotiating party. That's what the phone call proved. That the United States was the negotiating party, which just makes sense. The United States was actually the negotiating party in these color revolutions, in these United States-backed protests. Because when you live in Ukraine, you understand that large protests are put on by the United States or by Russia. Okay? That's what your average Ukrainian citizen knows and has known for generations, because for generations they have known they have zero sovereignty. They really, I mean, this is overstating the case. Not zero sovereignty, but very little sovereignty. And this is part of the problem of talking about something as complex as international relations and political science and government, because there are so many moving parts, right? That in order to describe the situation, you have to simplify, because it's not like it's billiards and you can plot the movement of each ball based on the motion and its mass. It's like fluid dynamics. And nobody has complete control over the masses. It's not like Putin can do anything he wants in Russia, and it's not like the United States can do anything they want in Russia. It's far, far more complicated than that. And then this is the part that triggered me the most.
No context in the phone call because they're talking about what's happening at the moment. Why they don't need to explain to each other the situation.
One question: who stripped the context out of the phone call? Was it Russia? Because Russia originally leaked the phone call.
Well, again, so it could be possible that Russia didn't play.
Russia leaked the phone call so that people would understand that that there were negotiations going on who's going to be prime minister with the U.S. ambassador. Like, this isn't somebody individually. This isn't somebody individually expressing their opinions. She's the freaking ambassador of the United States in the Ukraine. She's not allowed to have opinions on who should be. Like, how would you feel if the Russian ambassador to the United States was on the phone discussing who should be, like, U.S. Secretary of whatever. Like, that's not how it should work, right? Right?
The full phone call, or it's possible that was the full phone call. Because if you and I, Adam, are talking about something that's currently happening, we don't have to. I don't have to explain to you. Like, when we're talking about the Ukraine-Russia situation on the phone the other day, I didn't explain to you the history of the Ukraine-Russia situation.
We avoided all that.
Right, exactly. So obviously, a normal conversation is not going to have the context that it's happening currently.
You're right. You're totally right.
So anyway,
is that so? We need a little more. That's all. We ran out of stuff here.
Well, okay, that's all. That's all you have to know for the U.S. backed the 2014 coup bullshit.
Right.
Attempt.
So this guy is the one that becomes president. And then, but where does the current president come in?
Zelensky comes in later. He doesn't become president until like 2019 or something.
Okay.
So.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the
conversation is not going to have the context that it's happening currently.
You're
right. In response to Yanukovych offering him the position.
Right. Okay. And they've obviously stripped the context out of the phone call.
No, that fits with the narrative because they're claiming that the protests were, created by
AstroTurf. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
The U.S. somehow created 200,000 people.
The U.S. somehow created 200,000 people. And this is the part where they're both like, oh, this is crazy. And it's like, this is not crazy. This is not crazy.
People protesting for 3 months at a time.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, right. And then this conspiracy
How
is
does
further.
The US do that again?
Right. The conspiracy is further confused by the timing.
And it's like, oh, you don't realize the United States, like, we spend a lot of money making sure that we can have AstroTurf in these countries? How do you think we influence these countries? Like, where do you think our influence in these countries comes from? And just, yeah. Have you read The Fourth Turning by Neil Howe? I have not. This pattern we are in always ends. It's in war. The boomers that run our country really have has led us into a pickle. I'm not sure which particular thing you're talking about. I have to say, I really dislike the material dialectic. I really dislike the fact that people, especially people like Curtis Yarvin, people who think that they can see the future are really, really dumb. You cannot predict the future, right? You can try to give you can have some capacity to understand what is, I'm not sure what you mean, our boy YNH. But, Yuval Noah Harari? Yeah. I'm not sure I've seen him actually pretend that he can predict the future, that he knows exactly what's going to happen. But yeah, he's another one who drives me up the wall. Okay. Unless somebody wants to jump in and actually have a discussion. The biggest fool of them all is probably me. But I was enjoying the conversation yesterday regarding the relationship with animals. Thought you can bring up the midrash regarding Elijah, the false prophets, and their talking sacrifices. I don't know that particular midrash, but yeah, I mean that is also an interesting conversation to be had. Yeah. And Connie likes animals too. I'm done ranting. New stream about animals, maybe. Torah. You know what? Maybe I'll just end the stream and. I mean, if people want to do a just general stream, do I have time? I have stuff I should be doing. I'm gonna go do real life stuff. Jimmy Dore is a comedian, and comedians are incredibly important. But do not ever mistake a comedian for a court counselor, right? The court jester is not the prime minister, right? And that's what most people. That's where most people get what they get wrong. Okay, I am going to go and do stuff. Be well, people.